Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Real inspiration for real innovators. If you're looking for innovation and leadership transformation, your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Born. I would love for you to help us spread the word by leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And today, I also want to welcome Austria to the list of the 50 plus countries listening from around the world. Well, guys, today my guest is Shaunak Roy. He is the founder and CEO of Yellowdig. Yellowdig is a community-driven active learning platform that's adopted by over 130 colleges and universities, K-12 schools, and then also corporate training clients. Yellowdig's mission is to transform every classroom into an active, social, and experiential learning community. Welcome to the podcast, Shaunak.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Great to be here.
Well, I would love for you to tell us just a little bit about what active and engaged learning means to you. And then, really, honestly, what was the burden behind the fact that maybe that wasn't happening today?
Well, if you think about active learning, in a very basic sense, it means learning by doing. If you walk into a classroom today, typically what you would see is that a whole bunch of students sitting in front of a teacher, instructor, sitting for an hour, probably listening and learning something, but it's very hard to tell if they're really learning something or not. So the thing about active learning is, think about your field trips or projects or class projects or group projects where you really have to actually implement or build something as part of your learning is what active learning is. And, it's not new. There has been a lot of research that active learning drives better learning outcomes for the students. So, which is why it's important. I think, one of the reasons we are so excited about it is because as we can implement active learning in more classrooms around the country and around the globe, I mean, it kind of really gives me a lot of joy because I know that it kind of drives better learning.
You know, it's interesting when you kind of mentioned the description of active learning. I mean, that's exactly how I learn. I learn by doing, and so you can show me something 100 times, but until I'm able to walk through the steps for myself, I don't feel like I get that. But I wonder, like, what's the reason why we haven't really moved away from this lecture style in classrooms? Because you're right, it does feel pretty antiquated.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The thing is that, we always remember our favorite teachers who engaged us in those meaningful ways, right? I mean, that's how, I don't know if you remember, but that's how I remember my teachers who were kind of more than different, not in that similar typical lecture style ways of engaging us. The reason it's difficult is because it's a lot of work. Like, think about from a teacher standpoint, right? You can go in a lecture, prepare for it, deliver it, and come out. I mean, it's not that kind of work. There's some work, but not crazy amount of work. But if you think about engaging your students in a meaningful way, you have to prepare for those activities. You have to take them out at a certain time, and you have to kind of really design those projects that they're going to do. It's a lot of work, and it's just not possible given our teachers are so busy. I mean, they have their own lives and they have teaching so many. Sometimes they're not getting paid enough. Most
Right.
roles are like that. So it is a lot to ask for them to implement active learning styles in every classrooms or programs. The only thing I'll add there is that it doesn't have to be anymore because now we have something magical called technology. Technology is everywhere now, right? Every kid, every adult is using technology every day. Like, imagine in the pandemic, we are interacting with one another using technology. Why can't we use technology in a smarter way to drive better learning? And that is what I'm passionate about.
Well, I'd love to talk a little bit about some of that technology and how you actually help these schools and organizations take what they're doing today and then pair that with technology to solve some of these problems.
So when we think about changing our education system, it is a very hard problem because they have been around for such a long time. So we start with the students. When we kind of think about changing the learning design, we think about that what drives engagement. If you look at a kid today, it doesn't have to be of any age, actually, adults too. Like if you're playing a video game, for example, you are not thinking about not doing it, right? You're almost like it's very hard to take you off the video game because it's so engaging.
Yes.
It's so kind of, engrossing in some sense. So we have taken the best part of those video games that drives that interest and engagement in the intrinsic motivation, and we have applied it to designing learning environments like that. So the way we do this is we have created a platform which is Yellowdig, which drives this engaged social experiential learning in any classroom, but it feels like a video game. It not essentially you're like fighting with one another, but you're actually building and using it for constructive reasons, but like learning from one another essentially.
This is so real because over Christmas we got our kids Animal Crossing on Nintendo, and it is so hard to get them to stop playing that game. But it's cool. I like the fact that it teaches them to read. There's some principles in there about money. But you're right. Like it's like that is a very sticky game for them, and so I just love the intersectionality with education and finding those sticking points to help people learn. I mean, that's really, I think, the only way forward in the future that we're in right now.
That's exactly right. And in those, in Nintendo, and there are so many other games like Roblox or Minecraft.
Yep.
A lot of those games are also quite educational because they are, ways of training, teaching skills to students or learners or young kids. But it could be also used for classroom learning, right? That's the idea that we are trying to kind of put forward. And there is a lot of research also done behind it. We now know that why people like to play those games endlessly, because there are some very intrinsic behavior patterns which drives them to play those games. So the trick is to use those behavior patterns to actually better apply towards learning, and that's kind of what we do.
Wow, that's so powerful. Well, I was thinking a little bit about the pandemic and how it was a weird setback for a lot of kids with learning. I almost feel like in some ways we lost a year. And I just, I think about that as a very, challenging time for our whole population as we think about all that went on and people coming into their homes and having to learn from the home. And almost in some ways, we went even further into a lecture style of learning, but now you're watching a screen. And so I feel like there have been some setbacks, during that time. And I'm just curious, what have you seen with what you guys do with how the pandemic has impacted all of it?
Yeah, no, that's kind of the most real part right now. What I would say there is, the reality of it is that the schools were closed, and for a lot of kids who essentially have school as a place to learn, I mean, they don't have the space at home, or for whatever reason, they don't have the quiet space. That is a big impact for them because they lost that only opportunity to be in that environment with their teachers and their peer group. That has a tremendous impact. So one way of thinking about it is, okay, when the schools are going to open up, and if they have opened up, are they going to stay open? And that's a conversation that we can keep on having. The alternate way of thinking about the way is that can we now use also technology in a different way, which is a lot of these kids who either cannot get to school for whatever reason, or they cannot afford school, for that could also happen. Technology is not that expensive. Honestly, buying a laptop, and which is internet connected, which can connect you to your teachers, your peer group, is not that expensive in today's day and age. So the only question now becomes is that can we use those devices in a more meaningful way for them to learn, as opposed to probably play games and not learn or do other things. So that, I think that is something. The good thing is that I would say it has now given a lot of focus on technology. So if you think about teachers who decide how learning is delivered, before the pandemic, only a small segment of teachers were even interested to use technology in their classroom. So technology was almost like, okay, we will use it. But, the extent of use is probably using some sort of a screen, to show lectures or lecture capture or something like that. But it has much more power. So a lot of them have started using like Zoom, for example, right? I mean, this is at least they're getting used to technology. So the good thing that's happening is that a good majority of teachers are now, I think, have gone through the learning curve of using technology. May not be the best possible way. Maybe just sitting and teaching in Zoom is not the best thing to do, but at least they know now that that's available. And we are also seeing that there are a lot of innovators in educators. I mean, educators who, a lot of them are innovators, or they're frustrated themselves, like not being able to teach the right way. They are now coming forward and trying to design these new learning experiences. Working with companies like us, where we are building these technologies, or they're creating their own tools. And that didn't exist before. So we are seeing a lot of innovation that's happening in this space right now. And I think the indications, if they're all right, it seems like these are going to stay. So it's not that we're going to forget about it. Now the things are flipped. Now we would want to probably keep on innovating and try to build those experiences better.
Where either across the country or even across the world do you see people leaning in a little bit harder to this innovation than other places? Like, is there one place that's kind of a standout to you that you see doing this really, really well?
Well, I think we find is that there is a group of schools and universities which has always been kind of innovative in this area. Like for example, online teaching and learning has been there for a long time, and there are schools even before the pandemic who were using technology in a meaningful way, and we are seeing them kind of accelerate that usage of technology. Like, and it depends on schools and higher education, corporate training. They're all segments where people are innovating. I can name a few, but there are quite a few, more than to name essentially. But we are seeing a lot of innovation right now. And a lot of the innovation that's happening right now are essentially teacher driven. It's no longer just driven by the central IT, right, of a university or a school. I mean, they were the people who were buying technology in the past, but now we are finding a lot of teachers are starting to use these technologies. I mean, they reach out to us, and we get so many requests from teachers who want to just try our platform. We have a
Wow.
pilot program where we don't charge them anything. They can use our platform completely at no cost. If they qualify, there we have a qualification process. They can use it completely free, at no cost for the whole semester or the whole session. And we are seeing a big spike of that. So, which kind of gives us the indication that there's a lot of interest now, which is almost like a groundswell of using technology.
Wow, I'm wondering as I think about just technology and this in this area of learning, how do we take what is antiquated and outdated and not, technology friendly and create that movement? I'm wondering, did 2020 help with that, or is there still a lot more ground that needs to be gained in this area?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, in terms of changes happening in higher education, a lot of that, resistance right now is still the old way of doing things. It's a regulated space. The regulators have a lot of demand on these institutions in terms of how learning should happen. And at the end of the day, a lot of these schools are following that. So for them to innovate in that environment is quite difficult sometimes. So I would say that if there is true mass change to happen, I think there needs to be more awareness. We need to talk more about it, all the good stuff that is happening, so that parents start demanding, right, from their schools that they use technology. That's something we rarely hear about it, right? We talk about why schools are closed. Why don't we talk about why are we not using better technology for delivering online learning? Are there other tools available? So I think there could be a lot more conversation driven by the parents to be able to demand that from the schools, so the schools will then react to it. I think the schools can have more conversation with the regulators so that they start to recognize there are other ways of delivering learning, which can be very engaging, if not more engaging than classroom teaching, which could be approved by the regulators. There needs to be more conversation around groups that are building this technology. So a lot of the times, what I find is there are a lot of innovation happening, but these are all disparate. Like they're not talking to one another. Like each school has its kind of their own project going on. There could be more collaboration there. There could be like central organization. There are some, by the way, they're doing tremendous work, but there could be more of them where they're kind of pulling all of them together and building new technology products and spreading the word. So there's a lot to be done here. I mean, there's a lot of it's a big space, but I think the things are already happening in this direction. I think the things are accelerating for sure.
Wow, I'm just as you're talking, I'm just thinking about the bigger picture here. To your point of how each of these different schools are kind of doing their own thing, and we miss the impact and the power of coming together with a vision and a focus on what we want to change. And as you even talked about those different groups, there's government, and there's regulators, and there's parents and teachers and administrators. It does seem like there's so many different cooks in the kitchen, if you will, what do you feel like as we kind of look into the future, right? The next 3 to 5 years for learning, what do you feel like are a few areas that we could really focus our attention on to create greater ground in these areas?
Yeah, no, that's, there are so many stakeholders in this space. But if there is one stakeholders we want to get behind in a true way, I would say that's the students.
Yeah.
We have to really start to question that whether the time the students are spending in the classrooms and the value they're getting out of the education system, whether that is adding up, right, to in terms of the effort that is getting into it. So I think there has to be some real conversation here, because a lot of the times what happens in education is it's a very much of a system which is designed by completing the courses or getting the certification or getting into class 12 and then getting into college, passing college and getting a job, which is all good. And that's how the system was designed, which is almost like an assembly line, right? This is how we kind of thought about it. But the reality today is that there is learning loss happening. A lot of students who are in grade 12, and there was a study by Gallup, I mean, probably a few years back, which showed that a vast majority of high schoolers, they're saying that they are not engaged in the learning. They're just doing it because they want to get to college. I mean, there are studies out there, there are plenty of studies out there. I think this is time for us to take that seriously and say that, okay, why is this happening? Why are the students not engaged? Or they're not completing college? Are they really getting the value that they should be getting in these experiences? And how do we come together to kind of design the best experience for our learners? And I think everybody can get behind it. It's just that we just have to, increase the volume of that so that everybody kind of really start thinking about the future, right? As opposed to kind of, finding problems in one, what doesn't work, which is there are too many things that doesn't work today.
Wow. I would love to know a little bit more about your backstory. How did you get into this space in particular?
Well, it's interesting. So my background is I'm an engineer by training. I grew up in India. I did my undergrad in mechanical engineering from IIT Bombay, which is a very good technical college. And then after that, I kind of moved into my, came to the US, did my master's, and joined a corporate life. At some point, I decided that I want to be an entrepreneur. And kind of at that point, I was thinking that, okay, I need to find my true passion, that I would be interested for a long period of time, because I knew that if I want to do something, it's going to take a while. And it so happens that, learning is something I truly enjoy. And I could look back and I saw that the amount of time I went to some of the best colleges and really met great teachers, but I also felt the classroom time wasn't that useful. Most of my own learning has happened, in other ways, not really sitting in the classroom. And I said, you know what, maybe if you can change that, the impact is huge. Because imagine the number of students we are teaching every year multiplied by all the classroom they're sitting in. It's a huge number of students. So I thought that's probably a problem worth solving. And I jumped into it back in 2015, and I'm still building it. I'm kind of enjoying every day, I would say.
Well, what I love about that is your love for learning, but also you found an area of inefficiency in what you experienced, and I think that that intersection is such an important inflection point for all the entrepreneurs that listen to our podcast, which is you found something that was a natural sweet spot for you, coupled with an inefficiency and a way that you could see the world differently and make it better. And so I love that because I can see the passion for this just at the core of who you are.
No, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to my story, and it was great discussing with you.
Yeah. Well, any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Well, I think for us, I would say that for us, I mean, as listeners, I mean, the thing is, the question becomes, what can we do about it? As parents, as teachers, or students ourselves. I think it's just about kind of asking more from our institutions. If we are a parent, like asking more for our kids. If we are going to a school today, like why not asking that, why can't we have better access to technology, better learning environments? I think being more demanding may not be that bad for us to kind of really drive this change. So that's kind of the only thing I'll like leave you with.
I love that. Well, could you tell people how they can find not only you, but also a little bit more about your company?
So the best way to find me is in LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn and search for my name, Shaunak Roy, I should be found. And then reach out to me, and we can talk if you want to discuss more. And the company, the website is www.yellowdig.co. It's a single word, yellowdig.co. So if you go to our website, you will learn about all of what we do about active learning. And if you want to try the product, definitely there are ways to reach out from there as well.
I love that. And I just love the impact that you are having on society as a whole, which lasts for a lifetime. I mean, learning is such an important part of our journey. So thank you for taking up this cause and making us better.
Oh, no, thank you so much. Thanks for the time. And it was great chatting with you.
Same here. Well, to our listeners, thank you for joining the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Remember, don't just get out of the box, break the box and set it on fire. Let's go transform something.
Thank you for joining us for the Innovation Meets Leadership podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our show on iTunes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Innovation Meets Leadership, and visit our site at innovationmeetsleadership.com for more innovation resources.